I ran into the dark-haired woman, arriving back after a lengthy absence from the house, from Felix's old house, while the children got settled in. I also had the task of being a greeter for my great-great-grandnephew, whom I introduced to her upon our arrival. We shared conversation in the living room near the kitchen, keeping our eyes trained down the hall in case we disturbed anyone. I asked about that poor gentleman that bumped the hutch that evening in the kitchen. Asked about if he had hurt feelings, what happened to him. And a smile crossed her lips as she spoke. Oh, he's not stuck. He just thinks he is because he spent so much of his life like that. She reached, giggling, to pat my hand, appreciative. He did understand the catastrophe he left behind and the children's frustration. He felt terrible, so he won't be back. He doesn't realize that he's healthy once more. So he's going to stay until, I guess, he figures that out on his own. I was rather surprised our conversation continued, and the rest of the house seemed undisturbed. And then this dark-haired matriarch turned her attention to my great-great-grandnephew, taking her under her wing, as he was one of her own, counseling him as she had counseled me, because it is time for us all to move on. I wanted the boy to know how wonderful it did feel to purge your soul to a kind ear, and how gracious she was, offering us her wisdom and advice. And what a wonderful woman and family these couples have that moved into this house. What seemed like hours passed. Dawn was probably approaching soon. Neither of us had realized that our noise level had gone from talking to laughter as we began to share stories, especially with my great-great-grandnephew there. We simply got lost in the conversation. And that's when those same door hinges cried out desperately for oil, and our attention was drawn to the hall. That same young man emerged without his wife investigating on his heels. The dark-haired woman seemed caught off guard, though in hushed tones she was able to instruct us to remain quiet without calling any further attention to ourselves. We did, while remaining as far from his path as we could. He startled, as did the man of this level of the house, when my nephew pointed to his hand and began laughing. Once the man turned, my nephew slapped both his hands over his mouth, realizing that was audible, and his eyes went wide and terrified that we'd been caught. The man gave a simple, confused grunt and tore from one end of the house to the other, trying to find the source of that sound. Finally, he turned on the light to the room and stood. When the man went back down the hall, the dark-haired woman suggested we vanish off. In agreement, my nephew grabbed her hand before I had the chance. Instead, I had to whack my shin on that damn table once more, and that's what caught the man's attention again. He slipped back down the hall, remaining up against the wall and aiming that colorful gun straight towards me. I tried desperately to hold in any sound I wished to make, no matter how bad that had hurt. hitting my shin again. I simply cannot understand this at all. I am essentially invisible, yet that table is my nemesis and has injured me twice. Yet, other than this ghostly group, I have managed to never run into anything before. I heard the dark-haired woman ask my nephew what had struck him so funny in that moment seeing that gun. Apparently he and several of his cousins and siblings used those. I never noticed. This was a toy gun that shot foam darts. I found that out as one of the projectiles bounced off the wall next to my head. The man apparently responding, letting us know that he had either heard me or he was aware I was there. Without a thought, I turned to face the dark-haired woman and spoke aloud. Where is the deterrent in that for thieves or vandals? Are folks that afraid of losing an eye, or is it the foam that's threatening? Who's there? The man jumped around, searching for the source of the voice. But it was mine. I could only smack my forehead at the dark-haired woman shook her head at me, disappointed. My nephew biting his lip to restrain more laughter. I'm truly glad he found this amusing. Well, that is wonderful. I just got us all caught. They'll definitely go running and screaming into the night now, and this home will be vacant and cold forever, and it will be Uncle Winston's fault. I saw the dark-haired woman raise a finger. As it appears an idea struck her. She hurried my nephew to hide in the kitchen, motioning for me to join her side as she says, we're going to have to reveal ourselves. How do we do this? I asked nervously. Won't he just pack up and go? His wife was rather clear she's not going to have a haunted home. The dark-haired lady smiles mischievously. This one here is one of our sleepwalkers. Terrible disorder in our family, but easily convinced that this was all a dream. She takes my hand in hers, and I was so surprised that I could feel her, so solid as if living. How did she manage that? Very quickly, we were not the only stunned folks in the room. My once very translucent body began taking shape in a solid form, just as the dark-haired woman. The man with the colorful gun, his jaw dropped as he watched us slowly appear with saucer eyes, his face frozen as if he'd wished to scream, but he couldn't. Hello, Matthew, the dark-haired woman said. Aunt Agnes? His eyes shift from her to me and then back. Who is this with you? She smiles comfortingly and answers, This is Winston. His brother used to own your home. He stopped in to say welcome. Her melodic giggle filled the air. So I kept him because I thought that was very nice. The man she called Matthew huffed out a chuckle. Yeah, that sounds about right. Tipping his head to the side again, he watched Agnes with such awe in his eyes. I was wondering if I would ever see you again, he smiles. When I shot her a quizzical look, she nods to me once and explains, I used to check in on Matthew often for my sister. His grandmother is my niece. His great-grandmother is my sister. I check in on all the family and report back because it is still too painful for many to do so themselves. I nod in response, understanding that. Matthew offered us both a seat, appearing no longer shocked in the least that we were here. She kept a hold of his hand, guiding me towards the couch also, and we took seats. I apologized for the intrusion and asked Matthew about his weapon. He called it a weapon of opportunity. And to that, the laughter came from my nephew in the kitchen. And that's when Matthew decided that we needed to move our conversation closer to the kitchen.